I was
What can I do
just
for you, my
at
friend?
work. So I just honestly had a few questions. So
Of
I
course, yeah.
myself, I grew up in like a Catholic kind of background, and
Uh-huh.
then as I've gotten older, I've kind of met a lot of Muslims, and they've kind of been talking to me and kind of guiding me through some things.
Sure.
So I started kind of reading the Quran and looking into it, and I've been very fascinated. And he keeps asking me kind of like, why aren't you a Muslim yet? And what's like kind of the next bridging gap to get there?
Sure.
And one question I've always had was I'm a little confused. I'm not trying to be like accusatory or anything, but
That's fine.
about Uthman and like the destroying of the Quran and then kind of making kind of the proper Quran. And I was just kind of curious about kind of the background about that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So there is no making of the proper Quran done by Uthman radiallahu anh. The Prophet ﷺ, the Quran was revealed in 23 years. So it was not revealed as one book. It was revealed different verses, different chapters, etc.
Mhm.
Now, whenever a verse was revealed, Prophet ﷺ had groups of companions that are called writers of revelation. Now we have their names. We know who these people are, like Zayd ibn Thabit, Uthman ibn Affan, Ali ibn Abi Talib. We have their names. We know who they are. We know their biographies, etc. Now these people, the Prophet would call them and will tell them, command them to write the verses of the revelation. Okay, so that was the
Okay.
life of the Prophet, meaning the Quran was written, all of it, in the life of the Prophet, in his presence and by his command. Okay, not only that, the Prophet and the people, they memorized the verses of the Quran after the revelation. So today you have millions of people who memorize the Quran, letter by letter, all of it, from beginning to end. And
Mhm.
all of these people have what we call ijaza, which is a certificate of their memorization, which has the names of their teachers, the teachers of their teachers, all the way back to the Prophet. So the source of where they took the Quran from. And you can only take the ijaza after you've been tested in the Quran as a memorizer. So they will ask you and you'll have to say off by heart, you have to recite the Quran. If you don't do that, you don't get that certificate. And this is the
Okay.
case with all of these people in the chain of narration. Now we have millions of people with these certificates today, alive today, that we observe. Now this tradition was there from the life of the Prophet. So writing is something we don't even really care about as Muslims because of that oral tradition that exists. Nobody can change the Quran because they are memorizers of the Quran. So
Okay.
now you have people memorizing the Quran already. You have the Quran written down. Now at the end of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, Angel Gabriel comes to the Prophet ﷺ, and he revises the Quran with him twice and tells him where to place the verses. Now the Quran is complete. This is the chapters, these are the verses, etc. So he usually came to him once a year, and the last time he came 2 times to do the revision and put the verses in the places, etc. Now,
Yeah.
the Prophet ﷺ, before his death, now we have the Quran, we have the order of the verses, we have full of it memorized by the companions and by the Prophet, and we have it written down. But it's written down on parchment because at that time people had bones, they had rocks, they had whatever they could write on, they would write the Quran on, and it's
Mhm.
individually written because it was not revealed as one book. So the Prophet uh, passes away, and then you have the first caliphate, which is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, which is only ruled for 3 years, and he passed away. He didn't live for that long. So at the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, what happened is we had a battle that took place. Okay, it's called the Battle of Yamama. And in this battle
Okay.
where Muslims fought, as we said, there was many memorizers of the Quran already existed. So a lot of memorizers died in that battle. So they were fighting and they died.
Mhm.
So Umar ibn Khattab, which is the second caliphate, came to Abu Bakr while he was the leader. He came to the first caliphate. And he said that many people have died. And I fear that the Quran may be lost, meaning if everyone dies or something, then the
Mhm.
Quran will be lost. Bear in mind, Abu Bakr memorizes the full Quran. Umar himself, the one who's coming as speaking, he memorizes the full Quran. But he's saying, I'm
Mhm.
afraid if Muslims die, the Quran will be lost. So
Mhm.
why don't we collect it? It's present already written. So he makes this
Mhm.
suggestion to collect the Quran. Then they bring Zayd ibn Thabit, which is a companion of the Prophet. What does he do? He
Mhm.
collects all of these parchments of the Quran that we said that were written. And do you know what they do?
Mhm.
For every verse, and now bear in mind, we're talking about barely 1 year after the Prophet's death or 2 years. We're not talking about like years and years and years. We're talking
Oh,
about just
okay.
after the Prophet passes away.
Mhm.
Then Zayd ibn Thabit, what he does is this. With his committee, every single person that brings one verse of the Quran, They already memorized the Quran, so they know what is the Quran. But they still apply this criteria. They said every single person who will bring a written verse, he needs to have 2 witnesses that saw him taking that verse from the Prophet. Why are they doing that? To ensure that nobody comes later and say, oh, this is this is that. Not because they already have the Quran, but they went to that extent to make sure not leave any room of doubt.
Okay.
So for every single verse, they brought 2 witnesses, the testifying that, okay, we saw this person take this verse from the Prophet. Now they have the Quran collected. Now the Quran is there. Now you have the time of the second caliphate, which is Umar ibn Khattab. And then you have the time of Uthman ibn Affan, which is what you're talking about, the third caliphate of Islam. Now the Quran is already there. Collected is in the house of Hafsa, now the daughter of Umar, is there. There's no issues with it. It exists. Now what Uthman ibn Affan did is he made standard copies and sent, because now Islam widespread everywhere, right? You know, I'm sure you heard probably about Islam's expansion later, right? You had all the way from China to Spain, like you had this huge empire. So because Islam's widespread so much, what Uthman ibn Affan did is he made these book form copies of the Quran, and he sent to different regions of the Muslims. Like he sent to Levant, he sent to Iraq, he sent to different places. And then, so people can, this is the source now. And whatever these copies that he made, he brought Zayd ibn Thabit, remember that name? The same person who collected the time of Abu Bakr. He brought him to oversee these copies that are made. And then he sent these copies to different regions, so Muslims can have a copy they can rely on. It's a copy of the original, which they can rely on. And the original from Hafsa remained. Still there. That was written on the time of the Prophet. That stayed all the way until 50 or 60 AH, 20, 30 years after Uthman. And bear in mind, there was already millions of memorizers of the Quran. Nobody was concerned about the text anyways, the written text, because everyone was there. Anyone would go to the mosque, and there are people who teach the Quran, and then people who learn the Quran, and there's the concept that I told you about ijazah, give them permission that now you can teach the Quran as well. This tradition was always there, so nobody needed to rely on the writing anyways. So that is a kind of overview like of history, right? From beginning to end, so just we don't miss any points. Yeah. So
no, that was actually phenomenal.
Yeah, and that Uthmanic Mus'haf is what we have copies of today. So all the copies that we have from the 1st century onwards, like the Sana'a manuscripts, which are 15,000 parchments, date back to 950 Qur'ans from the 1st century onwards. A top copy, which is from the late 1st century. All of these manuscripts that we have are the same Uthmanic text, and they have the same Quran that we have today. The Birmingham parchment, the small parchment that we have in the Museum of Birmingham, which has from chapter 2 of the Quran, is carbon dated to the life of the Prophet himself. And it has the same Quran that we're reading today. So Muslims have no issues when it comes to whether it is written or oral preservation of the Quran. But we don't rely on the written as a primary source anyways.
Okay. Oh, that's phenomenal explanation then. Because I got really confused there. So that really adds a lot of kind of context to it.
No issues. Absolutely no issues. Is there any other questions that you struggle with or something?
I did. This is mostly just because I haven't done my research as well, and I could definitely deep dive farther into it. But just so my understanding of Jesus comes from just primarily the gospel, right? Especially with my background, that's where I've known him, and from the New Testament of the Bible. I was curious because my understanding is that Muslims kind of will see Jesus as a prophet, right, sent by Allah. And I was curious about, do you also pull from the gospel, or are there kind of other areas that Muslims will go to kind of read about Jesus or kind of find their instructions or what he was saying?
To be fair, the Muslims will only use a biblical description of Jesus when they talk to other Christians. Only. And the only reason they do that is because the Christians believe in the Bible. So Muslims be like, you believe in the Bible, but the Jesus in your own Bible disagrees with you. So that's the only reason when Muslims would quote Jesus from the Bible, to demonstrate that what Christians believe about him is not accurate according to what he said in their own book. That's the only reason Muslims will be reading that. When it comes to our own belief, when it comes to what Jesus said or did, we rely on the Quran as a primary method. We are agnostic about anything the Bible says about Jesus that contradicts Islam. We reject, if it doesn't contradict or agree with what Islam says, we're agnostic about it. We don't use it as a
Okay.
source of reliable information because it's written by unknown people and
Mhm.
it's been changed according to Christian scholars themselves. So we cannot rely on it attributing to Jesus what he did or what he didn't do. So we rely on the Quran,
Mhm.
which we have enough of a description of what Jesus did in the Quran, and even about his second coming in the future, etc. All of that. There's the story of his birth, from his virgin birth, what he said to the people, what he preached to the children of Israel, miracles he did. All of these things are there. Even things in the day of judgment, like when Allah will ask him in the day of judgment, and what he will say in response, etc. So there is more than sufficient, we say, information about Jesus in the Quran that suffices us for anyone who wants to learn about him.
Mhm. Okay. Well, that makes sense then. That's, sorry, I'm kind of just all over the
No,
place
sure,
now. I'm a
sure.
little excited.
How do you see
Uh,
Jesus, since you say from a
uh,
Christian background?
well, I myself am not Christian. I just grew up kind of in that background, so which is where I had to like kind of read the Bible and go over that.
Yeah.
So as I've becoming kind of understanding more of Islam, it's kind of skewed my kind of view of him. Not like in a negative way, I'm meaning. I'm just meaning away from that kind of, being God himself kind of way.
Mhm.
Um, and then, but some other things. Is it okay if I kind of go to another question? Just because,
No, that's
sorry,
fine.
my
That's fine.
grasp of
Go
knowledge
ahead.
isn't very deep on
No
this one.
problem.
Another one as well. So I've been reading the Quran a bit. I'm starting. So I was recommended to start from kind of the back to the front, just because it's smaller and kind of easier to digest. And I don't know if that's the best way to do it. I'm on, so I think 78 now, somewhere in there. But is your recommendation kind of the same, or do you say start from the front and go to the back? How would you recommend it for a new
Yeah,
kind of person getting into Islam? Mhm.
I wouldn't necessarily give that recommendation, especially for someone who comes from a Christian background, because chapter 2 talks about Adam and his
Okay.
creation,
Mhm.
and then the story of Adam, and then it goes into a description of Moses as well. It'll be a lot more
Mhm.
familiar, and I would say read it the way it is, in the order it is. And I don't agree
Mhm.
with the lazy approach many people would want to take. Let's read what's smaller. No, like read it
Mhm.
and take your time, finish reading,
Mhm.
investigate, because the story there is way more different than Christianity, and the Christians base their whole
Mhm.
religion on the original sin.
Mhm.
And this original sin concept is completely refuted in the beginning of the Quran. So I wouldn't want to miss that for someone who has a Christian background and tell him go read
Mhm.
from the smaller chapters of the Quran that talks about the afterlife or the attributes of Allah,
Mhm.
etc. I wouldn't give that description personally.
Okay. Read it the way it was intended, kind of concept.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah. Yes. I wouldn't
Okay,
claim
that's
it the way
true.
it's intended. I would just say the way chapter 1, 2, 3, just read.
Mhm. Okay, fair. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And then here, I'll kind of finish it off with this last one, just because I don't want to take up too much of your time.
No, that's
But
fine.
I was reading as well of so right, wine like alcohol is right haram, not supposed to drink any alcohol, right? And so this is kind of a two-parter question, just for an understanding's sake of
Sure.
I would like to know kind of the deeper concept behind that, because my understanding is that it's so it doesn't kind of mess or warp with your head and understanding,
Sure.
and you can't really worship when you're in that
Huh?
state. And then the second part is like just like clarification on that first part. And then the second part is in the Quran, it talks about when you get to Jahannam, there is a river of wine. And when I asked in Iman about it, he mentioned that it's
You
non-alcoholic
mean
and it's
Jannah?
made pure.
Yes.
Or sorry, my pronunciation is
Because
not very
Jahannam
well.
is hellfire. So but I get what you're
Oh,
saying. Yes. Yeah, it's okay. It's all right. It's no problem. I guess it's an Arabic word, so
oh,
it's not like your language. So I
mhm.
understand. Yes.
Oh, well, thank you,
So you
thank
said
you.
when
I
Imam, what
guess.
Imam was saying. Yes. You asked him
Oh,
about it,
sorry.
about the
He
river.
was saying that it was Allah's wine and it was pure and like non-alcoholic.
Sure.
And I was just kind of looking for like clarification on kind of those 2 points. Mhm.
Sure. Okay. So, all right. First thing we say is the Quran is a revelation of Allah, and meaning revelation of God. And if something is a revelation of God, then God has attributes. One of those attributes is the all-knowing, the all-wise. So by
Mhm.
extension, we submit to the commands of Allah, not necessarily due to the explanations of why Allah made that command, because Allah does not need to justify himself to us. So it's not like in a
Mhm.
position, okay, imagine when you, even like you have someone saying to his wife, do this, she would probably do it without asking. But imagine, okay, why do I
Mhm.
have to do this? Why do I have to do that? We don't have this kind of idea when it comes to the Creator. It's a relationship of subordination. We understand who Allah is, the attributes that He has. He doesn't need to justify or explain, oh, that's why you need to do that. If this was the case, then it would not be a relationship of submission and creation and creator. So we accept the commands of Allah coming from that aspect first. So I'm saying that is the reason we follow. Now, can we see wisdoms as human beings using our intelligence? Wisdoms of why Allah would make that command? Yes, we can. But we cannot know all the wisdoms because that is now the Creator's realm. That's not the realm of human beings. But let's see what wisdoms can we see. Very easy wisdoms. Okay, first, I'll ask you this question. Is alcohol, any amount of it, let's talk about the subject first. Any amount is beneficial for a human being? Any amount?
Nope, all negative.
Sure. So there was a recent study that they published in the Daily Mail and other places that 0.000 amount of alcohol is beneficial for you. Meaning no alcohol is beneficial for you, to put it simply.
Yeah.
Refuting that very fake quote-unquote study that was all, some wine is good for your heart, which was there so people can buy wine, essentially. That was why they said it anyways. So there's no amount of alcohol is good for you. Kidney failure, bad for your skin, one of the main causes of cancer. It's just bad for you in every single way possible. It's essentially rotten fruit. You leave the fruit to rot, and then you essentially, that's what it is. People might not want to accept it, but this is the case. It's rotten fruit. You're drinking rotten fruit. So it's not beneficial for you. It is harmful for you as a subject, as an individual. Now, when it comes to the effects of alcohol, is any of the effects of alcohol good for society, other people now?
Definitely not.
Okay, definitely not. So why definitely not? You look, you have domestic abuse in the household. I just watch England when England loses a football match. Look what they do to their wives. You have the study by the UN called Women Abused Every Day, Everywhere, which is only about countries in the Western countries and the US, which shows you the amount of women abused and the abuse that takes place to them. And a big role in that is alcohol, because you're no longer conscious. Alcohol covers your mind. That doesn't mean you're not accountable. You are accountable because you're the one who chose to drink. So you have domestic abuse. You have drinking and driving, killing yourself and people on the road. You have crimes. You have, for example, the Metropolitan Police. They said 60 to 70% of the knife crimes comes from people under influence. Drugs or alcohol doing the same effect, essentially, covering your mind. So you are harming other people because you are not there. You're fighting with other people, harming other people. Harm on a huge societal basis. Now, is that it? No. Alcohol always comes with things which are not good. You drink, you go and gamble. You drink, you commit fornication, and then you have kids, and those kids, you end up, what are you doing? You end up killing them, which they call abortion these days. Killing children, essentially. You have this drunk woman that had, intercourse. She didn't use any prevention, pregnancy prevention, and then she ends up being pregnant. It's a mistake, so let me abort. It's like mission abort button, as if it's not a human being or something. So they got these effects in society. Wherever alcohol is linked to it, it's always something bad. So the alcohol is the mother of all evil for that, because the minute you do it covers your mind, you do everything bad. So it is from the work of Satan. That's how Allah Azza wa Jal describes it in the Quran. And that's why Allah says, don't even come near it. Let alone drinking it. Don't even come near it, right? So that is a very basic, I would say, worldview when it comes to the idea of why, like the wisdom, some of the wisdoms, there's many more, but some of the wisdoms we can see as human beings of the prohibition of such a substance. And some people can say, I drink a little bit, I'm not an alcoholic. But nobody starts as an alcoholic. Everyone starts by drinking a little bit. But then you start having bad things in your life, you drink more. And then because alcohol is a drug, you always need more in order for you to go in that state of losing consciousness. You develop tolerance. That's how human bodies are. So you drink more and more. And then you end up becoming an alcoholic. That's how every alcoholic becomes an alcoholic. So you telling me, I'm a responsible drinker. Every alcoholic was a responsible drinker. That's not an argument, basically, from that some people make. Because any amount is harmful for you. Now, when it comes to the alcohol in paradise, Allah explicitly mentions in the Quran that alcohol is not, like alcohol you're going to drink is going to be sour and you're going to be like, making these facial expressions after you drink it, right? That's not going to be that. The alcohol, Allah says in the Quran, it's not going to give you these effects of losing consciousness and mind, or the after effects, the hangovers that people have and throwing up every morning, which is another thing you can add to the problems of alcohol list, You're not going to have that in the alcohol of paradise. So anything in the Quran that has the same name of something that exists in this life, it's unlike it in paradise. The Prophet told us whatever is in paradise is what no eyes have seen, what no ear have heard, and what no mind can imagine. So that is no way near the alcohol that we have in this life. Even you have the same term used for it, but it is not that. Because Allah tells us these descriptions that I was just telling you about. So I hope that, does that make sense?
Absolutely. That made perfect sense. Yeah. Is it okay if I throw another question at you as well?
Yeah, of course. No issues.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Thank you, man. I was looking into as well, discussing with kind of my friends of the Hadiths, right? And then some people were mentioning that some of the Hadiths are more kind of authenticated and credible than some of the others. And I personally have no knowledge of any of this. So I was just kind of curious to get like an inside kind of, look into which are they all authentic? Are they all, or are some more authentic than others? And just kind of the viewpoint of that.
Yeah, sure. So a hadith is what is narrated from the Prophet, authentically narrated from the Prophet, from his actions, his sayings, things he approved of, or his description, like whether it is his physical description or his character, his manners, what he did, etc. Because he's the example for mankind. So it's important for us to know, of course, the mannerisms, the behaviors that he did, so we can imitate them and do the same things when it comes to mannerisms and act and these specific things. So that is what hadith is. So that hadith essentially is composed of two parts. The text, i.e. what the Prophet said, what he did, what he approved of, the event, what took place. We call that matn. And then we have the other parts, which we call sanad, which is the chain of transmission. Who transmitted this information? Who told us this event or this thing that the Prophet did? Who said that? So we have something called a chain of narration. It will be has to be someone who met the Prophet, saw him, did what he did. And then this chain of transmission, you need to have someone who met the person who met the Prophet, then someone who met him, etc., until it reaches who gave us the event. Now, this is the case with every single narration we take from the Prophet. Even if that narration was, do this only. These two words. For these two words, we need a chain of narration of reliable individuals. That's it. Now, there is an authentic hadith, authentic narration, and a weak or a fabricated. So the weakest form of narrations is fabricated. Someone who completely fabricated something about the Prophet are reliable, we completely reject that. Then you have weak.
Yeah.
So you have a narration, for instance, and you have a chain of people transmitting it. But one person in the chain, he didn't have a good memory. How do we know? People in his community, they test him. And we have information about his reliability from them. Every single person in the chain. Now, that person has a weak memory. So we say that's a weak narration because we cannot rely on someone with a weak memory. Someone narrated something from someone he couldn't have met. Let's say someone who lived to 150 years before him. He couldn't have met him. So we say that this is called a chain. It has a disconnection there. It's not a connected chain. So that's a weak narration. We don't accept that. So it's a whole science. And you use that science to decipher narrations, which you will call weak, and reject based on these evidences that we're saying. One person in the chain lied or was a liar. We don't accept that narration. It doesn't matter. Even if the rest of the people are honest, one person is a liar, the whole narration is rejected. We don't accept it. So that's how we view the narration. And there's a whole science and tens of thousands of books written. Tens of thousands of books about the men in the chain, where they lived, what their community said about them, how good with their memory. They became weaker when they were older. They were stronger when everything about them is there. And these narrations, existence of all of this information is in the books, essentially. And the books of the hadith itself, meaning the reports of the Prophet. Like Bukhari, for example, what the Prophet said, what he did, Muslim, and all of these different books. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, and it kind of gives me a concept to look at them. And okay, that makes a lot of sense that they're passed down orally, and then that person is also kind of like tested to make sure that they know what they're.
So it's written and orally as well. So we even have written
Yes.
narrations of hadith very early, 100, 200 years after the Prophet. We have. So
Mhm.
we have Anas ibn Malik, his Muwatta, his book, we have it. And he was in the second century. In the first 200
Mhm.
years, you have Bukhari's as well. Bukhari's writing, we have Muslims. We have very early narrations, not only oral, but yes, we also mainly rely on the oral. Because we have all of the information about the oral narrators written and attested to as
Mhm.
well.
Okay. Mhm. No,
There
this
is no
makes a
one in
lot of sense.
history, in human
Mhm.
history, that goes to this extent when it comes to history, to
Mhm.
reliability of information. No religion, no civilization, nothing. Nobody.
Mhm.
Only Muslims went to that extent to preserve their tradition
Mhm.
and make sure that whatever is passed down is reliable information. Because we believe
Yeah.
Prophet Muhammad is the last messenger, and
Mhm.
after him, until the day of judgment, there's no other messengers. So the message needs to be preserved. Because
Yeah.
people like you and myself, we need to know what the Creator wants from us or requires from us, etc.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I
Okay.
said Anas ibn
Mhm.
Malik. I mean Malik ibn Anas, actually. Sorry, that's one is a
Oh.
companion and one is a authored the
Mhm.
narration, but it's okay. Yes.
Oh, okay. To me, it's I struggle quite a bit with this. Uh, um, as well.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. I
because if
just
you
had
ask
one.
like very detailed questions, you will
Mhm.
get like into very detailed issue areas sometimes. Yeah,
Mhm.
but not most people
Yeah.
would ask these questions, I would say. But if you come
Oh, okay.
across certain wrong information, it makes sense to ask these questions. So I get it.
Mhm. Uh, so in like you mentioned with the view of like the Bible is corrupted, right? People have corrupted it over time, right? It was people. And so how when you look at older prophets, right, and pulling information from that, does it work the same way with kind of the view of Jesus is the same with the view of Moses of just where you pull it from and you kind of have to have that grain of salt and if it doesn't align with the Quran, you probably should kind of look at it from a skewed kind of direction. Sorry, that was kind of awkward how I worded that.
Whatever information, yeah, we think about the prophets. Our source is the
Mhm.
Quran
Okay.
because God knows history.
Mhm.
When it comes to unreliable sources writing information about prophets of God, it's neither here or there. And the biggest problem with that is it also makes zero sense. Most of it. It's irrational.
Mhm.
Like if I hypothetically just say this is a very crude example, but it's an actual example in the Bible. Let's say I,
Mhm.
not me, let's just say some guy has
Mhm.
intercourse with his daughters, his own daughters. He drinks, he overdrinks. He has
Mhm.
intercourse with the daughter, his own daughter. And then the next day, he does the same thing with the other daughter, right?
Mhm.
Okay, it's two daughters. Now, and this person comes to you and says, my friend, I'm a prophet of God, and you're going to learn information from me about God now. What would you say to that
Mhm.
person?
I'd be quite skewed with what they're telling me.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, or another person who's like, you know what, he sees a woman, oh, he thinks he's a beautiful. And he has
Mhm.
an army commander, is very righteous, very loyal, but she's his wife. He says, you know
Mhm.
what? I want this woman. It doesn't matter. This guy is the best army, most loyal. It doesn't matter. You know what
Mhm.
I'm going to do is I'm going to send him to war. I'm going to put him on the front line so he can die, and then I'll take his wife.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And when he dies, you go
Yeah.
and you have fornication with his wife.
Mhm.
And when you have a child, what they use the word "be" for it. I'm not going to even say it, right? For that child that comes from these illegal relationships. Now that child is a prophet of God, and you're also a prophet of God, the one who sent the army
Mhm.
leader to die. Yeah, and then
Mhm.
we're coming to teach you information.
Yeah.
Would you take that? Look, we just say rational, like logic, basic reasoning. When God
Mhm.
sends prophets and messengers, He's not going to choose someone who will do everything wrong under the sun. So you say we don't take information from you. He'll send people which can be
Mhm.
examples for mankind, which will be
Yeah.
easy for you because God wants you to be guided to accept the
Mhm.
message from them. That's why even if
Yeah.
you use common sense, we don't even need to go into whether this disagrees with the Quran or not. And all of this
Mhm.
nonsense, none of it exists in Islam about the prophets. We have the stories of the prophets. None of them do any of these things because
Mhm.
these are absolutely impossible to be described to people that you claim is actually prophets of God and people learn from them.
Yeah. Mhm. Uh, I love that you pulled them right from the Bible.
Yeah, no.
Uh,
The interesting thing is this
yeah.
is Lot, for example, we talked about the daughters, and he's called a righteous servant. in the Bible.
Yeah.
Like, and by the way, another prophet, if you want to talk about Abraham, he married his sister.
Yep.
So what else do you want me to say? You know, he married his own blood sister. The Bible mentions that. You don't call it half sister, whatever, but still a sister, his sister. And he married it. Like, come on, just call some common sense. You're not going to accept this information about prophets of God. Wherever you look about prophet of God, you find very crazy attributions to them. And it would make perfect sense for the people, that nation that these prophets were sent to, which were a corrupt nation. They worship the calf. They changed the revelation of God multiple times. They killed prophets of God. Of course, they're going to change and attribute the worst things to the prophets. They attribute the worst things to God himself. Why wouldn't they do it to the prophets? They said God is defeated by Jacob in a wrestling match. He forgets and he needs to be remembered. He regrets the decisions that he made. The rainbow reminds him when he forgets. All of this nonsense that they describe to God. So let alone prophets. Humans are not gonna, you're not gonna be safe from their changes if they ascribe these things to God.
Yeah. That's a really good way to look at it. Yeah. I like that. A lot more kind of, like you were mentioning, common sense, kind of rationale thoughts.
Sometimes they say, like some people say, common sense is no longer common. It's with many of these people that still follow these things, The common sense is not common there for some reason, sadly, for many individuals.
Okay. I got another one for you. And please don't take this as disrespect. This is pure curiosity and kind of genuine. So you hear a lot about, especially when you find, those random YouTube or TikTok videos of just, Christian arguing with Muslim and the cliche stuff of, and they'll kind of just throw out there, well, the Prophet Muhammad got with Aisha when she was quite young. And I don't know the date or her age, so I'm not going to say it because personally, of course, I'm coming to you for knowledge. So I was kind of curious about, is there validity to that? And, how old was Aisha when they got married, and just kind of the more rationale kind of look at it.
Yeah, for that, I would prefer, because that would require another long explanation. I would say to the person who has this question to go to a video which I have specifically about that, which someone asks about why did Prophet marry a young daughter or something, or the Prophet's marriage, etc. You'll find it on my channel, available there. And it's like almost 20-minute video or something, where I go from only about this topic, because it's a very common thing. 24/7 Christians have nothing to say except this, right? There's nothing about Islam. They sleep, like they wake up in the morning, Aisha. They sleep in the night, Aisha. Like their alarm, Aisha. That's how their life is. These Christians that you're describing, this is how they live the life. The funniest thing is, I'm going to tell you this. The funniest things about these Christians specifically is that they have in their own tradition. You have rabbis admitting to this. That Isaac married Rebecca at the age of 3. If you make the calculation, it had to be the age of 3. So you see the age of Sarah, the age of Abraham, when he's all of that. It had to be from 3 to 10. That was her age. So they have that in their tradition. They have the church fathers explicitly making statements about the age of marriage. They have no age of marriage in the Bible, actually, at all. Zero. There is no like a specific description. But they just come and try to, make these absurd comments, All it talks about the Bible is puberty. If you read Ezekiel, I'm not going to get into the verses because they're very graphic, It's not like appropriate for YouTube, We talk about the woman is ready. It talks about her physical going through puberty. It talks about her body parts, which we're not going to talk about. Anyways, that's what the Bible talks about, okay? When it comes to when is the woman ready for marriage or intercourse or whatever term you want to use. And they still try and make these arguments. I don't know how. And what's most important thing? The most important thing is this: Muslims have articles of faith, 6 articles of faith. Okay. If one Muslim comes and says, "I believe that Aisha, radiallahu anha, was 25 when the Prophet married her," hypothetically speaking, which is not the case. If he says that, is there any issue with him being a Muslim? Is he not a Muslim now? No. There's no issues at all. Why? I'll tell you why there's no issues. It's not one of our articles of faith. We don't say believing in Allah, the books, the messengers, Aisha's age, and these are not the articles of faith that Muslims have. So this criticism that they have is not a criticism against the religion, because someone can still hold the belief, because just the age of one of the wife of the prophets when he married her. That information is not relevant to the foundations of the faith, you know? None of it is going to refute the religion if you say she's that age or that age. But this is the only thing they can hold on to, clutch to straws, because they have no substance when it comes to arguing actual foundations, like the reliability of their scriptures, evidences for their beliefs, that they have their creeds. This is what we argue when we come to arguments from a Muslim perspective.
Yeah.
So watching that video would be perfect if you'd like to like the whole details of it as well. But I'm just giving you an overview as to why this is not even an important matter to discuss.
Yeah, it's kind of just a bad preference, but like Hail Mary, they're just throwing it out there.
Red herring, like some people would say. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Okay, no, that's great. And I'll probably just definitely watch the video, because I've always been kind of curious about the background for that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
I'll give you one hint from the video. Are you from the US?
Canada, yeah.
Canada, okay. So do you know the legal age of marriage? That's the only hint I'm going to give you from the video, and then you can watch the video. Do you know the legal age of marriage in the 1800s in the US and in the UK?
I don't know.
No. So you have William Blackstone. Who's William Blackstone? William Blackstone was a jurist in the 1800s, and they teach his books in Cambridge, and anyone who's studying law, they teach his books, because he was a jurist and he wrote about law. So he has a book called Commentaries on the British Law of England. So he comments on the law at that time in the 1800s. Now he says in his book, in page 110, a woman can be given in marriage at the age of 7, entitled to dowry at the age of 9. So the legal age of marriage in the UK in the 1800s, now we're not talking about 1,400 years ago, we're talking about 200 years ago. It was 7 years old. In Delaware, it was 7. And it was 10 generally in the US, in the Bible Belt, Texas, and these places. It was 10 years old. Now, a lot of the people are completely in a different world. They don't understand that human history was something. And today, development of women and their psychology and their mentality and marriage in society is a completely different thing. So applying these standards is called it's a fallacy called presentism. Applying the morality of today or the standards of today when things are different to the past, it's it's fallacious reasoning. But I'll let you watch the video, as I said, where I go into details about that.
Okay, phenomenal. Thank you.
No problem.
Well, here, I'll probably skedaddle. I'm supposed to be working,
No issues.
But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No issues. And you're welcome to be Muslim anytime, because I know your friend, he tells you why you're not Muslim yet. So I hope we dealt with the preventions, whatever was preventing you from taking that step. And anytime you're welcome to come back if you'd like to become Muslim or inquire about that or anything. And I'm sure your friend is also there. It was a pleasure talking to you, my friend. All right. See you.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
No problem.